At the beginning of today's newsletter, we invite you to update the situation in the most fierce battlefield today, the city of Bakhmut, in eastern Ukraine. According to the New York Times, the battle here is protracted, bitterly. Here, unmanned aerial vehicles are playing a bloody role. Standing in the bunker, a Ukrainian commander watched a live drone video that showed a dozen or so Russian soldiers walking through a field on the outskirts of Bakhmut. Artillery forces were mobilized for combat. This is one of the typical forms of fighting around Bakhmut and other cities and towns in eastern Ukraine. Both Russia and Ukraine conduct bombardment, assisted by unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. According to the New York Times, Ukrainian forces in the city center of Bakhmut operate close to the Russians, sometimes even at close quarters, so they can hear enemy voices and see enemy bloodshed. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, it became more difficult to attack the enemy. On the screen of the Ukrainian commander, the scene was rather messy. Tiny figures moved very slowly in the mud. The Kiev side will guess their speed of movement and the flight time of the explosives, thereby deciding when and how far to drop the bomb. One soldier said, "What do you think, 150 meters? No, better than 200 meters. Meanwhile, more smoke rose around the Russian army. The New York Times updated, after 6 attacks, the Russian army fled, there were some casualties. According to Western governments, fighting in and around Bakhmut has lasted 10 months, one of the fiercest and deadliest, leaving tens of thousands of people dead and injured. There has been much debate about the strategic significance of this region. However, both Russia and Ukraine say that they must hold on to exhaust each other's fighting strength. In the south, Russia's RIA news agency, citing a Russian officer on April 5, said a Ukrainian drone crashed near Europe's largest nuclear power plant Zaporizhzhia. This development comes as the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, is expected to visit Russia to discuss efforts to ensure the security of this facility. Russian forces downed a Ukrainian kamikaze drone aiming at a target somewhere on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant territory, Vladimir Rogov, the chairman of the We Are Together with Russia movement, reported. A Polish-made Warmate kamikaze drone belonging to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was downed in Energodar with the help of electronic warfare means. According to preliminary information, its target was a Zaporizhzhia NPP facility. The drone, which was on its way to Europe's largest nuclear power plant, fell several meters from the nuclear facility, he said on his Telegram channel. International Atomic Energy Agency head Rafael Grossi was due to travel to Russia's Kaliningrad region on Wednesday, a week after visiting the Zaporizhzhia facility in southern Ukraine, which is controlled by Russian forces. According to the Russian military officer cited by RIA, a Polish-made drone weighing more than 2 kilograms, 4 pounds, had crashed near the plant. The news agency did not say when. Grossi has been pushing for a demilitarized zone around Europe's largest nuclear facility, which has come under repeated shelling, with Russia and Ukraine have blamed on each other. Russia is expecting to receive financial support from abroad to bankroll its war, British military intelligence has revealed. Mikhail Mishustin, the Russian prime minister, indicated it is planning to issue the country's sovereign debt in foreign currencies to sell to investors abroad. This will plug some gaps in its budget as part of a plan for a long war in Ukraine, according to the UK Defence Ministry. Until now, it said, Russia's own banks have been the driving force behind buying Russian debt, but they are unlikely to have the capacity to fully fund upcoming budget deficits. By allowing investors from other countries to purchase its sovereign debt, such investors would be indirectly financing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it said. Russian officials likely see external debt issuance as one way to plug gaps in Russia's finances as they plan for a long war in Ukraine, said the UK MOD in a statement. However, it remains unclear whether Russia will succeed in implementing the measures. Ukraine will have to convince its Western allies to support a series of counterattacks, not just one, according to a military expert. Serhiy Zgurets, an expert on the Ukrainian military and director of the Defense Express publication, said Kiev's potential counterattack was actively discussed in the US and Europe. The supply of equipment and ammunition will be a key factor in determining when and where the new blow will break out. Zgurets' comments came as the US announced an additional $2.6 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Airborne surveillance radars, anti-tank missiles and fuel tankers are among the aid that the Pentagon has provided. Along with that were artillery shells, Soviet-era Grad missiles and armored bridging systems, used in the attacks. "We expect Ukraine to launch a spring offensive in the coming weeks," said Ambassador Julianne Smith, the U.S. permanent representative to NATO. Former Kyiv military commanders have also revealed that the country's counterattacks are not far away. On April 5, the French president went to China to restart relations with an important Asian economic partner and persuade President Xi Jinping to change his stance on Ukraine. According to The Guardian, Paris sees China as a party that can shift the balance in the conflict in the Eastern European country. Emmanuel Macron has arrived in China for a 3-day state visit in which he hopes to dissuade Xi Jinping from supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine while also developing European trade ties with Beijing. China is the only country in the world capable of having an immediate and radical impact on the conflict, in one direction or the other, an official from the French president's office said of the war in Ukraine. Paris sees China as a possible game-changer in the war, able to tip the balance in a positive way through potential dialogue on conditions for an end to the conflict, or in a negative way if Beijing were to increase support for Russia and provide arms. China has portrayed itself as seeking a peaceful resolution to Russia's attack on Ukraine. But the Chinese president's friendly visit to Moscow last month and announcement of a peace plan most saw as skewed towards Russia have left Western countries concerned. French officials know China will stop short of criticizing the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and will not condemn the Ukraine war, but Macron intends to stress the EU's position on the danger of the conflict. China is seen as the only country able to open communications channels to all parties in the conflict and to put effective diplomatic pressure on Putin. The French president's visit, his first to China since the COVID pandemic, will include more than 6 hours of time with Xi between meetings and banquets. A French official said human rights issues would be raised, including the treatment of Uyghurs and other minorities. Key issues under discussion will be the Ukraine war and the rebalancing of trade links after stringent zero-COVID regulations, as well as the climate crisis and renewable energy. There will also be talks on renewing cultural links and travel, as Paris wants to encourage Chinese tourists back to France. The EU does not expect a significant change in China's position but believes it is crucial to keep engaging with the superpower, notably on trade issues. In 2022, China was the EU's third-largest partner in exports of goods and the largest partner for EU imports. EU leaders want to rebalance their commercial relationship while also addressing the 27-nation bloc's dependence on China in strategic sectors such as critical raw materials, computing-related technologies, semiconductors, and clean technologies. Former U.S. President Bill Clinton said he regrets persuading Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons in the 1990s. In an interview with Irish broadcaster RT Tuesday, he suggested Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if Kyiv still had nuclear weapons. "I feel a personal stake because I got them, Ukraine, to agree to give up their nuclear weapons. And none of them believe that Russia would have pulled this stunt if Ukraine still had their weapons," Clinton told RT. In January 1994, Clinton signed a tripartite agreement with then-Russian President Boris Yeltsin and then Ukrainian President Leonid Kravchuk, the State Department said. The agreement stipulates that Ukraine will transfer all nuclear weapons on its territory to Russia, for destruction. It was an attempt to get rid of the weapons left over after the collapse of the Soviet Union. In December 1994, Ukraine joined the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, as a non-nuclear state. The White House said that the United States, Russia and Britain had provided security guarantees to Ukraine, and the START I treaty took effect from there. "I know that President Putin does not support the agreement that Yeltsin made, which is never to interfere in Ukrainian territory, in exchange for Kyiv giving up nuclear weapons," Clinton told RT. Putin broke that promise when he attacked Crimea. "I find that terrible, because Ukraine is a very important country. I think what Putin did is very wrong." Russia asserts that it launched a special military operation to prevent NATO from expanding to the east, by admitting Ukraine, as well as defascistizing the neighboring country, saving the Russian-speaking population being oppressed by Kyiv. There was bound to be a bittersweet feeling in Kyiv yesterday as Finland joined the military alliance NATO after a fast-tracked accession process, given that Ukraine has also applied but faces far more barriers to entry. Those include not only the fact Ukraine is in an active ongoing war with Russia but also a likely reluctance among some members who have warmer relations with Moscow, such as Turkey and Hungary, to antagonize Russia further at a time when relations between NATO and Russia are already dire. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia's aggression against his country shows that only collective preventive security guarantees, like those offered by member of the NATO military alliance, are reliable. Speaking in his nightly address Tuesday, after Finland became the 31st member of NATO after decades of military non-alignment, Zelensky said it was an historic event for the whole of Europe, for the entire Euro-Atlantic community. Congratulating Finland, Zelensky said Finland now has a reliable guarantee of safety, a collective guarantee. The European Union will discuss the 11th package of sanctions against Russia after this weekend's Catholic Easter holidays, Politico's European edition reported on Wednesday. A new round of consultations between the European Commission and EU ambassadors is expected just after the Easter holiday, 3 EU diplomats told the newspaper. Earlier, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the 11th package would be aimed at countering loopholes and any circumvention. Reuters reported earlier this week, the EU was mulling the imposition of sanctions on Russia's nuclear energy industry in Europe and Rosatom by offering Hungary specific carve-outs. Last year, Budapest was similarly allowed to buy Russian pipeline oil on which the other EU countries put their embargo effective from December 5, 2022. The EU failed to slap sanctions on Russia's state-owned nuclear energy corporation in its 10th package on February 25 over opposition from Hungary. Ladies and gentlemen, an international investigation into last September's Nord Stream pipeline explosions is of great importance for uncovering the truth behind the incident, said an Italian legal expert on Wednesday. In an article published in February on the U.S portal Substack, investigative reporter and Pulitzer Prize winner Seymour Hersh revealed that the United States partnered with Norway in a top-secret operation in June 2022 to plant remotely triggered explosives that took out 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines 3 months later. Fabio Marcelli, head of the Institute for International Legal Studies, ISGI, under the National Research Council of Italy, CNR, said that if Hersh's bombshell report on U.S involvement in the Nord Stream blasts proves to be true, then the sabotage would be considered a terrorist attack. He also stressed the importance of dialogue and efforts to promote peace against the backdrop of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. It is a worrisome sign that the Security Council failed to adopt the draft resolution due to U.S and Western objections, but it is important to find out what really happened. The only way to confirm the veracity of Hersh's report is through an international investigation, said Marcelli. The Nord Stream pipelines, which transported natural gas from Russia to European markets via Germany, were severely damaged last September after blasts in the Baltic Sea. Recently, the UN Security Council, UNSC, failed to adopt a draft resolution to investigate the Nord Stream pipeline explosion after a few countries, including the United States, blocked the effort. China has launched military patrols in 2 areas of the Taiwan Strait ahead of the meeting between U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen in Los Angeles during her transit trip to the United States, the Chinese Maritime Safety Administration in the province of Fujian said on Wednesday. The Fujian Customs Administration, which is opposite the Chinese island of Taiwan, announced that special joint patrols took place in the north-central area of the Taiwan Strait. Attached to the notice are pictures of the patrol areas, located very close to Taiwan. Previously, on April 3, the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker's office announced that the meeting with Tsai On-van would take place on April 5. This is the first meeting between the leader of Taiwan and the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives on U.S. soil. In response, China resolutely opposed and said that the meeting contradicted the One China policy and undermined the country's sovereignty. On March 29, the Taiwanese delegation led by Tsai Ing-wen began a 10-day visit to the 2 Central American countries. On April 1, the delegation arrived in Guatemala with a transit point in New York and visited Belize on April 3. On April 5, the Taiwanese leader will transit in Los Angeles on his way back to the island. The situation around Taiwan is especially escalated after former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made a surprise visit to the island last August. Beijing vehemently condemned the trip, calling it a gesture of support for separatism, and conducted large-scale military exercises in the area around the island. Despite China's tough response, other Western politicians continued to visit the island after Pelosi's visit. The Indian Air Force will soon carry out the first firing of the S-400 missile system the South Asian Republic bought from Russia several years ago, India Today reported on Tuesday. To prove the capabilities of the system, the first firing of the air defense system is planned to be held very soon against a fast-moving aerial target, top defense sources told the television channel. According to them, before, the Indian military conducted its firings only in Russia. New Delhi announced its intention to purchase Russian-made S-400 air defense systems in 2015. A $5.43 billion contract to deliver 5 regiment sets of S-400 Triumph anti-aircraft missile systems was signed during Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India in October 2018. Indian officials say the S-400 contracts are to meet urgent requirements for national security. India received its first missile complex in January 2022 and deployed it in the state of Punjab, which is close to the border of China and Pakistan. In February, Rosoboronexport CEO Alexander Mikheyev said that Russia's state arms seller was successfully implementing the contract to supply S-400 air defense systems to India. North Korea held a conference of its journalists' union earlier this week for the first time in 22 years and urged its members to become devoted spokespeople of the ruling Workers' Party, state media reported Wednesday. The 9th conference of the Journalists' Union of Korea took place in Pyongyang on Monday and Tuesday, joined by top state media officials, including Ri Chun-hee, the iconic news presenter for Korean Central TV. The KCNA said the conference served as an important opportunity to improve the country's work on publication and news reporting by establishing the ruling party's ideology on them as a firm guideline. During the meeting, the chairman of the union's Central Committee called on its members to accept the policies and stance of the ruling party as the absolute truth and become its devoted spokespeople to lead the country's socialist construction, it said. The members unanimously voted to revise the union's rules, although the KCNA did not provide details on its content. They also elected a new chairman and vice chairman of the union's Central Committee. This week's conference could be intended to bolster the regime's propaganda efforts as it seeks to ward off foreign influences and battles with chronic food shortages, observers said. The North last convened the union's conference in November 2001, long before the country's current leader Kim Jong-un took power in 2011. The North is known for being one of the worst countries for press freedom in the world, with its media outlets tightly controlled by the state. A subdued former President Donald Trump lashed out on Tuesday, April 4, at New York prosecutor Alvin Bragg for bringing criminal charges against him and declared himself the victim of election interference without offering evidence. "I never thought anything like this could happen in America," Trump told supporters gathered at his Mar-a-Lago home in Palm Beach, Florida. "The only crime that I've committed has been to fearlessly defend our nation against those who seek to destroy it." Trump took fresh shots at all the various legal cases against him, from the handling of classified documents that were taken to Mar-a-Lago when Trump moved out of the White House in early 2021, the probe into the January 6, 2021, assault on the U.S. Capitol and the election interference case he is facing in Georgia from the 2020 election. Trump expressed particular concern about the documents case being investigated by special counsel Jack Smith, who he called a lunatic several times. Trump pleaded not guilty in a Manhattan court to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, as prosecutors accused him of orchestrating payments to 2 women before the 2016 election to suppress publication of their sexual encounters with him. Trump accused Manhattan District Attorney Bragg of being out to get him, before he knew anything about me. He said the judge in the case, Juan Merchan, is a Trump-hating judge. But he did not offer any evidence to support his claim that they were taking their actions in order to undermine his White House bid. Despite launching a tirade against prosecutors, he did not call for new protests from his supporters. Trump, running for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024, is expected to return to the campaign trail soon. He gave no details of that. Students in Nashville marched towards Tennessee State Capitol on Monday, April 3, to demand an end to gun violence and support stronger gun laws after a deadly shooting at the Covenant School last week. Chanting slogans such as, "Hey hey, ho ho, the NRA, National Rifle Association, has got to go," and "Stop the Silence, End Gun Violence," high school and college students staged a walkout in the streets of downtown Nashville. Eyewitness Andrew Moranis told Reuters that thousands of Vanderbilt University students walked out of class in the morning to join the protest. Moranis said he was impressed by the turnout, adding the U.S. is relying on young people to lead the way on topics such as gun reform, racial justice, LGBTQ rights, and climate change. On March 27, 3 pupils and 3 staff members were killed at Nashville's Covenant School during the latest gun violence incident. Police responded and killed the assailant, a 28-year-old former student at the school. A motive for the shooting was as yet unclear. Republican lawmakers in Tennessee last week delayed hearings on gun legislation that would expand access to firearms. The state in recent years has made it easier to acquire firearms and done away with the need for permits to carry concealed handguns. Britain's data watchdog has fined Chinese video sharing app TikTok about $16 million for breaching data protection law, including by using the personal data of children under 13 without parental consent. The Information Commissioner's Office, which announced the decision Tuesday, says TikTok failed to acquire such consent for about 2 years from 2018. The ICO estimates TikTok allowed up to 1.4 million children under 13 to use its platform in 2020, even though its own rules do not permit children under 13 to create an account. A TikTok spokesperson said the company disagreed with the ICO's decision, noting it invests heavily to keep under 13s off the platform and its 40,000-strong safety team works around the clock to keep it safe for the community. The spokesperson said TikTok will continue to review the decision and is considering its next steps. Philippine annual inflation eased for a second consecutive month in March on slower rises in food and transport costs, data showed on Wednesday, supporting the case for the central bank to consider a pause in its monetary tightening cycle. The Consumer Price Index, PHCPI equals ECI, rose 7.6% in March, the statistics agency said, below an 8.0% forecast in a Reuters poll and marking the slowest pace of price increases in 6 months. However, confusing the picture, core inflation accelerated to 8.0% in March from February's 7.8%, the fastest pace since 1999. While inflation is beginning to slow down, it remains the most pressing issue that the government must monitor and urgently address, Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Baliscan said in a statement. To tackle inflation, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, BSP, will continue to adjust its monetary policy stance as necessary to prevent the further broadening of price pressures, the BSP said in a statement, calling for timely and effective implementation of non-monetary measures to keep prices in check. Buying milk is getting expensive in India and the price could soon hit an all-time high, forcing the world's biggest producer to step up imports to boost supplies and ease cost of living pressures. Farmers are wrestling with a rare double whammy, a lethal condition called lumpy skin disease in their cows and a drawdown in market-ready cattle stock after the coronavirus pandemic slowed breeding. Milk prices have already jumped more than 15% to 56 rupees, $0.68 a liter over the past year, the fastest rise in a decade, making it difficult for the government to bring retail inflation below the central bank's target. The soaring prices of milk and other basic goods is expected to become a political issue heading into state elections later this year. Any upside risk coming from higher milk prices is going to pose an additional challenge, said Upasana Bhardwaj, chief economist at India's Kotak Mahindra Bank. Since milk has a weightage of 6% in the Consumer Price Index, any spike could have a reasonable implication on headline inflation, she said. Industry officials estimate demand for dairy products to rise 7% this year. But milk production is likely to have risen just 1% in the fiscal year to March 2023, well below the average annual rate of 5.6% in the past decade, said a senior official of the government-backed National Dairy Development Board, NDDB. The official declined to be named as he was not authorized to speak to the media. Worshippers at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound described a violent night on Wednesday, April 5, after Israeli police attacked dozens of worshippers before dawn in what they claimed was a response to rioting. The police were firing tear gas and stun grenades. "It was a scene that I can't describe," one worshipper told Reuters, claiming that detained worshippers were beaten by police. The incident sparked protests across the occupied West Bank, and the Israeli military said 9 rockets were fired from Gaza toward Israel after sirens blared in southern towns. Violence in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem has surged over the past year, and there is concern that tensions could escalate this month, as the Muslim holy month of Ramadan coincides with Judaism's Passover and Christian Easter. Finland is building a 200-kilometer-long fence along the border with Russia, with the 3-meter-high fence equipped with electronic sensors expected to take 4 years to complete, aiming to prevent illegal migrations from Russia. The fence will be erected at a site on the border southeast of the town of Imatra, as there are currently only a few small fences erected in the area, to prevent livestock from passing. A Finnish border guard said that before the COVID-19 pandemic, up to 13,000 people passed through this place every day. Right now, only a few hundred people cross the border. In 2015, nearly 5,000 illegal migrants crossed the border from Russia into Finland. Hilkka Koskinen, a Vantaa resident, said, "We are really in favor of building a fence, so that no one can pass arbitrarily like before. A fence built high is absolutely necessary." The Finnish border guard has announced the need to have a fence on the border with Russia. "We have a long border and do not have enough manpower to control it all." On the other hand, the Finnish border guard also emphasized necessity of increased electronic surveillance, said Riikka Purra, chairman of the Finns party. Finland shares a 1,340 kilometers land border with Russia, the longest of any European Union member. Severe storms moved through Illinois on Tuesday, April 4th, causing extensive damage to homes, cars, and power lines, an eyewitness video showed. Video obtained by Reuters showed tornadic winds swirling around a neighborhood in the city of Kelowna, with lightning striking a power line, setting off sparks and fire. Capturing the scene from inside a property, the eyewitness filmed pieces of debris spiraling in the air and being strewn across a backyard, while a large structure collapsed and crushed onto another building. Other parts of Illinois are under a severe thunderstorm warning issued by the National Weather Service for possible hail, lightning, and a chance of tornado. The highest risk areas through Tuesday night will be eastern Iowa, northern Illinois, and parts of Arkansas and Missouri. The weather system is predicted to track north-northeast across central U.S. through Wednesday, April 5th, night, bringing widespread blizzard conditions to the northern plains. Severe weather will develop ahead of and along the trailing cold front as it pushes east on Tuesday and Wednesday. Areas from the western and central Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes region could see severe thunderstorms. Buckingham Palace released on Tuesday, April 4th, the artwork of the invitation for the King's coronation on May 6th. The artwork, designed by heraldic artist Andrew Jameson, was hand-painted in watercolor and gouache, and features a motif of the Green Man, an ancient figure from British folklore. Flowers on the invitation, which will be made from recycled card, will appear in groupings of 3, a nod to the king being the monarch to be called Charles, and it will also feature a lion, a unicorn and a boar, taken from the royal couple's coats of arms. It will be sent out to more than 2,000 coronation guests. As well as the invitation design, the palace also released a new portrait of King Charles and Camilla, the Queen Consort, and announced the 8 pages of honor who will attend the head royals during the coronation service. Recently, Charles made his first state visit as monarch to Germany, where he was greeted with military honors in Berlin and spoke in the lower house of parliament, the Bundestag. The Louis Vuitton Foundation Museum on Wednesday, April 5th, launched an exhibition on the artistic collaboration between Jean-Michel Basquiat, 1960–1988, and Andy Warhol, 1928–1987, between 1983 and 1985, consisting of more than 70 of the 160 works that resulted from their work together. The exhibition, Basquiat x Warhol, Painted with 4 Hands, is the largest exhibition of the collaboration of these two characters, with more than 300 works and documents. Through them they recreate the art scene of New York City in the 80s. In addition, the two's own works are also selected for inclusion in the exhibition. Some of the most notable works of their careers will be on display, such as the painting African Masks and the sculpture 10 Punching Bags. There are signs of the two artists' mutual influence, despite their differences in artistic aesthetics. Warhol, inspired by Basquiat, returned to creative work as a painter. In contrast, Basquiat used silkscreen printing in his works. Police violence, social problems, racism intersected with individual madness, consumerism, popular culture became the main themes in paintings and sculptures. The exhibition is scheduled to run until August 28 at the Louis Vuitton Museum in Paris. This activity aims to raise funds for the creative activities of contemporary art artists.